So with UFC London coming up this Saturday, these are the current best active UK fighters in the UFC, in my opinion. Starting off the list, we have got Paul Craig, who has a professional MMA record of 17 wins, 9 losses and 1 draw. He has currently got 9 wins in the UFC, 9 losses in the UFC, and he has got 1 draw. And that draw comes to former UFC light heavyweight champion Shogun. Look, I mean this in the most respectful way ever. Paul Craig might be the worst, best fighter the UFC's ever had. What I mean by that is, when you look at some of the names Paul Craig has beaten and compare that to some of the names that Paul Craig has lost to, it's insane. I mean, this guy's beat former UFC light heavyweight champion in Jamal Hill. I'm pretty sure Paul Craig was the first guy to ever beat Jamal Hill in the sport of MMA. Then after that, you have got the win over Magomed Ankalaev, the current UFC light heavyweight champion. Paul Craig was also the first guy to beat him. Magomed Ankalaev since then has went on a crazy unbeaten streak, beating the likes of Johnny Walker by finish. He just beat Alex Pereira at UFC 313. He beat the likes of Rakic, Ustamir. He's also beaten Nikita Krylov himself. Ankalaev has went on a crazy streak after losing to Paul Craig. Paul Craig is the guy's kryptonite, obviously. So what this now means in the UFC is we're going to get Paul Craig getting an immediate title matchup against Magomed Ankalaev, because when you look at the landscape, that there's what makes the most sense. But no, in all seriousness, Paul Craig, like I said, might be the worst, best fighter ever. The wins over Ankalaev, Jamal Hill. He's also got some other good wins, especially over Nikita Krylov. That's a really good win, in my opinion. I'm pretty sure he submitted Nikita Krylov in the very first round. He's also a former ranked UFC light heavyweight fighter. He did just recently move down to the middleweight division. I can't remember exactly, did he get ranked? A part of me thinks he was ranked number 15 at one point in that division, but hasn't really went to plan. He's had 1 win in the middleweight division with 3 losses. Losing to Brendan Allen, not a bad loss in my opinion. Losing to Kyle Baralho, again, not a bad loss to have. And then just recently lost to Bo Nickel at UFC 309. But we are yet to know how good Bo Nickel actually is. But Paul Craig is kicking this list off. Moving on up, we have got MVP. Now, MVP hasn't really done much in the UFC as of yet. If we were taking his even if it was his overall MMA career, I still don't think I'd have him above anyone else on the list, because yes, he's had a lot of KOs throughout his career, but that was in Bellator when realistically he was fighting a lot of cans, if we're being honest. Now, outside of the UFC, he does have some pretty good wins. Paul Daly, I think that's a good win. And then he avenged his loss to Douglas Lima in Bellator as well. He beat him. That there is a good win to have, in my opinion. But since coming to the UFC, he's had 3 fights. He's currently 2-1 in the UFC. His overall MMA record is 23 wins, 3 losses. He is currently coming off a big win over Sharabullet Magomedov, who was that undefeated prospect in the middleweight division. MVP moved up a division because MVP is a welterweight fighter. Even after beating Sharabullet, he has said he is moving back down to the welterweight division. But MVP just outstruck him in there. MVP is probably one of the best strikers we have ever seen in the sport of MMA. And that's just facts. I mean, this guy's got some of the most unorthodox striking we have ever seen. If you don't threaten a takedown with this guy and just solely choose to stand with him, it's going to be very hard for you to beat him. Very, very hard for you to beat him. Unless you've got this one-punch knockout power, because this guy striking is just next level. Now, obviously, like I said, he beat the undefeated Sharabullet Magomedov in his last fight. Styled on him. Just easily beat him, if we're being honest. The fight before that, he lost to the number 6th, 7th ranked UFC welterweight in Ian Gary. Ian Gary showed his fight IQ in that matchup by using his grappling to beat MVP. And then before that, when he made his UFC debut, he did style on Kevin Holland at UFC 299, I believe, in the Miami card. That was when Sean O'Malley defended his belt against Chito Vera. Since joining the UFC, though, we haven't seen the viral KO knockout moments from MVP. He's yet to knock out anybody in the UFC. But again, this is the difference. When he was fighting these cans in Bellator, they were just nowhere near the level of MVP. Now he's moved over to the UFC. Just the difference in level of competition from Bellator to the UFC is just insane. But MVP, really good, a really fun fighter to watch, one of the best strikers the sport has ever seen. Moving on up the list, we have got Lerone Murphy. Now, Lerone Murphy has a current record of 15 wins, 0 losses. He is undefeated and he has 1 draw. He's got 2 wins coming from 2 wins in the UFC by KO. He is ranked inside the top 10 of the featherweight division. He has also got some big wins over Dan Ige and Edson Barbosa. He is set to take on Josh Emmett in his next matchup. Josh Emmett is ranked just outside the top 5, I believe, or is ranked number 5 in the UFC's featherweight division. Lerone Murphy is very well rounded in my opinion. He kind of reminds me of Leon Edwards, where he's just good everywhere. The Josh Emmett matchup is going to be a tough one for him because in his last matchup against Dan Ige, he did get caught and visibly hurt badly in that matchup. If Josh Emmett can land the same shot, I think he puts him out, but I think Lerone Murphy is just that well-rounded. I actually do think he is going to beat Josh Emmett. Again, I just think he's like a Leon Edwards. He's just good everywhere, and I think he's going to be able to mix it up a lot. I think he's going to mix it up really well in there against Josh Emmett, keep himself defensively sound. Will it be the most entertaining performance? I'm probably going to say no, but I think it will just show how good Lerone Murphy actually is, and that he could possibly be a future title challenger in the UFC featherweight division. Moving on up the rankings, we have got Paddy Pimblett. Paddy the fucking Baddy, lad. Paddy the fucking Baddy. Tell me how good that impression was in the comments below. But yeah, Paddy Pimblett, current professional MMA record of 22 wins, 3 losses. He is currently 6-0 in the UFC. 4 of those wins have came by stoppage. Paddy Pimblett is currently ranked number 12 in the UFC's lightweight division. Could potentially break the top 10 here with his next matchup against Michael Chandler at UFC 314 in Miami. He is taking on Michael Chandler in the co-main event, which is 5 rounds. Paddy Pimblett has looked good in his UFC career so far. Obviously, you've got the fact he did gas out against Tony Ferguson, couldn't get the finish, but comfortably beat Tony Ferguson in every single round. The Jared Gordon one is the big one. Obviously, a lot of people kind of turned on Paddy Pimblett after the way he acted after that fight. A lot of people thought that Jared Gordon was robbed in that matchup. It was really close, but what makes that fight and the performance from Paddy Pimblett in there even more impressive is the fact that the guy broke his foot in like the very first round and he was still able to fight at that level throughout the rest of the fight. And also coming off that win over Bobby Green at UFC 304 last year, where he essentially just submitted Bobby Green out cold, just choked him unconscious. I actually thought Bobby Green was going to win that matchup until the day then I did change to Paddy Pimblett, but I thought Bobby Green's boxing was just going to be too much for Paddy Pimblett. And then Paddy Pimblett just showed how elite he is on the ground. Paddy Pimblett is an elite level grappler. His jiu-jitsu is insane. I do think he is going to beat Michael Chandler, although the Michael Chandler matchup is a tough one for him because Paddy Pimblett does leave his chin in the air. Michael Chandler does hit like a fucking boss. Can Paddy Pimblett out-grapple Michael Chandler? I don't see him taking Michael Chandler down. Michael Chandler, I wouldn't say is chinny, but he can be hurt and rocked. We've seen it. Paddy Pimblett does pack a punch as well. I'm looking forward to seeing that one. Paddy Pimblett, he is on this list for sure. Moving on up, we're getting into the top 3 now, which I think is fairly obvious. We have got Arnold Allen. He is currently ranked in the UFC's featherweight division, a professional record of 20 wins, 3 losses. He is currently 11-2 in the UFC. He's got 3 wins in the UFC by stoppage. You could argue for the win over Calvin Kattar, but Calvin Kattar's knee blew out, if I remember correctly, in that matchup. He has got some really massive fights under his belt in the UFC. Hasn't won them all now, but has been in there with some elite guys like Max Holloway, Movsar Evloev, which he was very, very unlucky in that matchup, in my opinion. He's also stopped Dan Hooker. He's beat the likes of Calvin Kattar as well. This guy was undefeated from 2015 all the way to 2023 as well, so he was undefeated for a very long time. He's very well rounded. I'm looking forward to seeing him get back in the cage. I don't know who they're going to have him fight next. Maybe Brian Ortega, although he said he wanted to move up the lightweight. Either Brian Ortega or Aljamain Sterling. I think that is the direction that they're going to go next for Arnold Allen, but he is definitely top 3 in terms of active UK UFC fighters right now. I don't think a lot of people talk about how good Arnold Allen actually is. The guy slept on. Now we're into the final 2. Number 2, I have got Tom Aspinall. Now, a lot of people might say Tom Aspinall should be number 1, and I think when it's all said and done for Tom Aspinall's career, I think he will go down as the best, probably the best heavyweight of all time, and the best MMA fighter to ever come out of the UK. Tom Aspinall has a professional MMA record of 15 wins, 3 losses. He's currently 8-1 in the UFC. All his wins in the UFC have came by stoppage. I'm pretty sure he's got like the least amount of fight time in UFC history. He is the current UFC interim heavyweight champion, I believe. I know he won the interim belt off Sergey Pavlovich, defended it against Curtis Blades, which is just insane. Defending an interim title is just fucking nuts. But I don't know now if he still has the interim title because John Jones defended against Stipe in that bullshit matchup at UFC 309. So I don't know if they've kept the title on Tom Aspinall. Let me know in the comments below. But yeah, he's already beaten half of the UFC's top 10 heavyweights. Curtis Blades by KO, Pavlovich, Volkov, Tybura, Spivak, and he is also going to beat John Jones if John Jones stops ducking him. He is number 2 right now. And number 1 for me, it's Leon Edwards. Again, I will shamelessly hold my hands up. I thought this guy was going to be the greatest UFC welterweight of all time. I believed that. And he was robbed of his title at UFC 304 to Bilal Muhammad because the UFC stitched this guy up with the timing. And that's just facts. Leon Edwards, professional MMA record of 22 wins, 4 losses. My throat, my voice. 22 wins, 4 losses, 14 wins in the UFC. He was undefeated from 2016 all the way to 2014. He's a former UFC welterweight champion with 2 title defenses. He beat Prime Kamaru Usman back to back. He knocked him out, then he styled on him in their trilogy. Before people say that isn't Prime Kamaru Usman, before their second fight, people were saying he was better than GSP. I was one of those people that said Usman was better than GSP. Everyone was saying he was in his prime. He was pound for pound number 1. And then as soon as Leon KOs him, people say the KO was a fluke. Then they go on to say that Usman was out of his prime. His knees were done by the time Leon Edwards fought him. Doesn't really make much sense. Then he went on and beat Colby Covington again. A lot of people thought stylistically he was a nightmare matchup for Leon. Leon showed how good he was in there. He even out-grappled Colby for large parts of the matchup as well. He's also beat the likes of RDA, Donald Cerrone, Nate Diaz. His resume is stacked. Leon Edwards right now is the best active fighter. I think he's the best fighter ever, currently, to come out of the UK in my opinion. All time, Leon right now is the best. Over Michael Bisping, over anybody else. Leon is the best right now in my opinion. So yeah, those are the current best active UK UFC fighters in my opinion. Let me know your opinions in the comments below. And as always, like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Thanks for the support. And I'll see you again in the next one.